talk. I'd put out questions to
Okay.
people, and obviously most people, not surprisingly, had one thing on their mind, and was about immigration. And I think like where I live, I live in like the good old rural Ireland, and a lot of people have issues with, we'll say, for example, in Ballysadare, there would be like 115 asylum seekers moved in, and then there's going to be another 140 moved in, which is like 20% of the population of a tiny place already.
Hmm.
And then there's kind of, they're all men, and there's really not much for people. There's not much for anyone to do anyways. So with regards to jobs and all like that, and I think the government and the media probably hasn't handled it the best by kind of targeting people with the whole far right kind of thing, and that doesn't do anyone any favors. And I think it doesn't really matter where the men are from. If there was 150 or 250 Dublin men moved in, I think it's the fact that there's kind of fear of not knowing or not have any. The government seem to not really tell people or have any conversation with people about anything like that. Where do you think that this kind of the kind of end game with this is? Because even before we've had a lot of people coming in the last, we'll say, year, we've had a housing crisis and everything. And no, you can't blame, people tend to blame people coming in for that. And we had
Hmm.
it way before that.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of, we're at a point where we're kind of at a breaking point anyways. And what do you think the end game is with this?
Well, I think that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are delighted if people blame asylum seekers for all the crises that they face, because
Right.
it distracts attention from them. They need to be careful in how they play that. They
Yeah.
can't play that very openly.
Hmm.
Um, but I think they're quite happy with it, quite happy to stoke it, quite happy to suggest. I mean, I was on the show on Virgin Media, the Tonight Show,
Okay.
with I can't remember if it was Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, but she said, yeah, though, well, very difficult, the housing crisis, all these Ukrainians coming in, it's a great excuse for them.
Mm.
Um, and I think, like you said, like, it's just, that's bollocks. Like, it is not true. If all the refugees went home tomorrow, all the asylum seekers went home tomorrow, we would still have a housing crisis
Mm.
because, like, just practically speaking, asylum seekers are in like horrendous, overcrowded accommodation, the kind of horrendous, overcrowded accommodation that the 12,000 like mostly Irish homeless people are in. So they're not in the homes that we need.
Mm.
So I think the government is very happy for this kind of distraction and this divide and rule of ordinary people, that it tends towards a situation where people look to, and it can be hard for people kind of structurally to look like far up there at the people who are benefiting from the housing crisis. Big developers are like massively increasing their profits, their revenues are massively up. Big corporate landlords, like these people, like these are the people who are responsible for the housing crisis. But it can be difficult for people, if there isn't a lot of struggle, if people's kind of heads aren't high, it can be difficult to look all the way up there and think that's the problem. And it can
Mm.
be easier to look at around the corner on the streets, the asylum seekers in tents, or in the local community, this influx of men, etc., and to blame them. But I think like they're just like they're not to blame, and even the government policy in terms of like them being here isn't to blame.
Yeah.
So I think there is lots, like there's obviously a lot in that question, and there's a lot you can criticize the government for. Like main thing, well, I think two sides in which the government is responsible. One is like the government themselves legitimize a discrimination between different types of asylum seekers. So the government treats Ukrainian asylum seekers like reasonably well, right? They're like not
Mm.
not great, but they get PPS numbers. They're relatively quickly in better accommodation. But if you are a man from not Ukraine applying for asylum, they put you on the street. And the message that sends out is like, oh, these people are in some way less legitimate than Ukrainian asylum seekers. So that's very problematic. And then putting people on the street where literally their tents can be burned. But the second thing is both an historic and a current issue of neglect of communities. And this is like it's interesting because I obviously there's a center for asylum seekers around the corner for me, and there was a local meeting, and there people were saying, why aren't these down the country? Why are they all in Dublin? You know, but then when you hear in rural areas, people say it's
Yes.
all in rural areas, right? So people, but like it's the same issue, is like the basic neglect of communities, the lack of services for communities, and then people
Mhm.
have a sense that, oh, this is going to put extra strain, etc. So I thought Michael D. Higgins had a good phrase, which is that we should flood these areas with services. Like that's the answer, is to get rid of this like artificial shortage and this therefore potential for competition.